Troy with TM Listings, and I'm going to be doing a HUD outreach. Today I'm going to cover HUD forfeiture of earnest money and their earnest money policy. First of all, the homes that are under $250,000, earnest money is $1,000, and homes that are $250,000 and above, our earnest money is $2,000. The earnest money is different for owner occupants than investors. And so, if you pay cash, you have 30 days to close from the time the contract's ratified. That means signed by all parties, 45 days if you're using financing other than 203K, and 60 days if you're using the 203K. The HUD uses a federal contract, and a lot of us agents are used to using state contracts where a person can get out of a contract really for any reason. The bar's pretty low. They can just say for whatever they want to cancel when we're using a state contract. But with HUD, they make you kind of earn your way out of it. And let's read this. If the executed contract is canceled, the closing agent must forfeit earnest money to HUD or release earnest money to the buyer based, right here we're looking at, solely upon the direction of RAIN. RAIN is the asset manager for HUD. So HUD is solely going to make that, or RAIN HUD is solely going to make that decision. Neither the buyer nor buyer's agents have the authority to give direction regarding disposition of HUD's earnest money. So it's going to be the asset manager's decision. The failure by purchaser to close on the sale of the property within the allowable period, including any extensions approved by HUD, may result in the forfeiture of the entire earnest money deposit, except where special circumstances exist. These situations will need to be documented and approved and granted by HUD. So this is what we want to look at. They're going to need to be documented, approved, and granted by HUD. You're going to have to kind of earn your way out of this one. Please note that the inspection period time is 15 days from the ratification of the contract. Uninsured sales. So HUD does insured and uninsured sales. The appraiser, HUD hires an appraiser, not your purchaser. It's something that HUD does on the backside. They have all their homes appraised, and the appraiser determines whether the home is insurable, meaning that they'll allow FHA financing again or not. And so it's different rules. So if a person were to forfeit with an uninsured sales, let's read it here. The uninsured sales, the purchaser will forfeit the entire earnest money deposit for failure to close within the allotted time, regardless of the reason. If it's insured, the purchaser will forfeit 50% of the earnest money deposit for failure to close if the purchaser is determined by HUD or direct endorsement underwriter to be an unacceptable buyer. The purchaser will forfeit the entire earnest money deposit if the sale fails to close for any other reason. I have seen in my experience that if they're an owner-occupant, HUD will grant extensions. They do charge for those, and we'll do an extension in a different video on how to do that and the fees and all of that, but they have been pretty fair about that. With investors, they'll typically charge unless it's a seller fault. These are the circumstances that a purchaser will receive a refund for the entire deposit under the following circumstances. And if you notice here, it says owner-occupant purchases. If an investor cancels for any reason, I've not seen them get their earnest money back. So the risk factor for an investor when they buy a home, if they cancel for any reason, would be the forfeiture of the earnest money. That's important to know when you're bidding for investors. So here are the reasons. There's been a death in the immediate family, contractor holder, spouse, or children living in the same household. There has been recent serious illness in the immediate family that has resulted in significant medical expenses or substantial loss in income, thus adversely affecting the purchaser's financial ability to close the sale. There has been a loss of job by one of the primary breadwinners or substantial loss of income through no fault of the purchaser. For FHA insured sales, HUD or direct endorsement underwriter using HUD guidelines determine that the purchaser is not acceptable. So this could be like a denial letter from a lender. For uninsured sales, the purchaser was pre-approved for mortgage financing in an appropriate amount by a recognized mortgage lender and despite good faith efforts is unable to obtain mortgage financing. Pre-approval means a commitment has been obtained from a recognized mortgage lender for the mortgage financing in a specified dollar amount sufficient to the purchase of property, lender denial. For other good cause determined by HUD. Owner occupants may request that the sales contract be canceled if within 15 days of HUD acceptance, the property is inspected by a professional home inspector who discovers a structural, so these are the reasons that are allowing you to cancel. If a professional home inspector discovers a structural, roof, system defects, or noncompliance with local zones, code zones, or building requirements that, here it is, key, were not previously disclosed. So if they've disclosed this to you and you cancel for the reason that they've already disclosed to you, they're going to keep your earnest money. So you don't want to, if you're trying to cancel, you don't want to cancel based on something they've already disclosed to you. So look at the disclosures and make sure it's not that. And HUD elects not to correct, which I've not seen them correct anything, so I maybe they'll do it, but I've not seen them do that in many, many, many years I've been doing this. Or within such 15-day period, the property is inspected for the presence of radon by a professional radon inspector to the extent unsatisfactory to the buyer. So they're saying that a radon test a person could cancel for. Kitchen appliance, window, air conditioner units, light fixtures, receptacles, and other switch covers are not included in operating systems, so those would not be reasons you could cancel. The earnest money deposit will be returned to the owner occupant purchasers only if HUD concurs with the home inspection report findings. So again, it's at HUD's discretion. I've seen them be pretty fair about this, so if the buyer chooses to cancel the sales contract due to the inspection or any other test report, the buyer must submit the cancellation within 15 days of the date of the executed by the asset manager. So when the contract's ratified, you got to get your inspection and submit that in time to get your earnest money back. And then it just goes on here to say, on an uninsurable sale, owner-occupant purchaser will forfeit 50% of the earnest money deposit in those instances where, despite good faith efforts by the purchaser, there is inability to obtain a mortgage loan from a recognized mortgage lender. On either types of sale, the purchaser will forfeit the entire earnest money deposit in those instances where no supporting documentation is submitted. So you have to submit. If the inspector says you got a bad roof and you're canceling for that reason and it hasn't previously been disclosed to you, you got to submit the documentation. Where documentation fails to provide an acceptable cause for the buyer or failure to close, or where documentation is not provided within a reasonable time for the contract cancellation. So in summary, earnest money is $1,000 on homes 250 and under, $2,000 for homes 250 and over. If you're an investor and you cancel after the contract's been ratified, you're going to lose your earnest money for any reason. And if you're an owner occupant and you cancel, you want to cancel for reasons that are not previously disclosed to you, and you want to submit with your cancellation proof from a home inspector on why you're doing it, or you could use radon, or if a lender were to deny the loan. So that's how the earnest money forfeiture policy works. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll get you another outreach in the future coming up here.